Howdy.
Welcome to Shebrew as we study the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. So as you remember, we are studying the Torah portions through the lens of relationships. So that's relationships between every human possible that we run into, and also our relationship with God. So let's dig in.
The name of this Torah portion is Metzora, and that basically means the one with zarat, or is commonly translated leprosy. And this is in Vayikra or Leviticus chapters 14 and 15. So we're not going to read a whole lot of it. A lot of it is going to be based on our understanding that you have read these chapters and you're familiar with it, although we are going to read some of these verses. We're going to start out talking about chapter 14. And one thing that we want to go ahead and point out in chapter 14 is there's an emphasis on life, on being alive or living. The Hebrew word that is used 12 times in this chapter is chai or chayim. 5 times it is translated as running, as in running water or living water. And then 7 times we have the word alive or alive that is there. So there's a huge emphasis on life, being alive and living. As in the case of the Metzora, who was symbolically dead, is now going to come back to life. It's a picture of resurrection from a life of exile back to a life of restoration in the community.
Yeah, so do you have life? Are you living the life that God wants you to go ahead and live? Are you enjoying the things that are around you, or are you miserable? Stop it. Just stop it. Let's live life.
Definitely. So we're going to focus in on this time on having life in our relationships, having life within ourselves. So that's some of the things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at the connections between this ritual that is in chapter 14 and also some of the other rituals that are in the Torah.
Yeah.
So there's one ritual in the Midbar in Numbers chapter 19, which is commonly known as the red heifer cleansing. It's when there was a burning of a red heifer with some other elements that these ashes were used to cleanse you when you came into contact with death. There were some common elements between the cleansing of the Metzora and the burning of the red heifer, mainly that the blood was sprinkled 7 times in each ceremony, and there was also some common elements of cedarwood, hyssop, and scarlet. So these two rituals, they have this connection. They both have to do with cleansing or transitioning from a state of death and tameh being unclean, to a state of life and tahor being clean. There's also another ritual that this Metzora cleansing is connected with, and that's back in Leviticus chapter 8, which was the ordination of the priesthood. Yeah. Now, both of these rituals used the blood of a sacrifice. They applied it to the right ear and to the right thumb and to the right big toe. And there was the pouring of oil on the head. So these two are connected because both of them represent a transition from one state of existence to another. Mm-hmm. Both represented the beginning of a new life with the symbology of the ear, the thumb, and the big toe. And these are representing the hearing, the acting, the walking in accordance with the will and with the desire of Elohim.
Yeah, that's similar to when you get married. Either you have a marriage license, you change your name for us women, and so you're going from being single from your maiden name to your married name now, so now you have this transition in a way of moving from one status to another status, and it's the same thing in regards to wedding rings. You have your wedding ring on, and that symbolizes that you're taken, that you're married. You've gone from being single, and looking for a spouse to now you're married, and now you are separate, and now you are, one with your spouse.
Mm.
That's one way of looking at it.
It's definitely a great way to kind of look at these rituals that are there and applying it into our life today. The Metzora, we're going to transition a little bit here to how does this reflect and show us our relationship with Elohim. The Metzora, the one with scale disease, translated as leprosy or leper in a lot of translations, is effectively dead. They're exiled from family, from friends, from community. But when their Zorat, leprosy, is healed, then the Metzora undergoes these rituals that symbolize rebirth into a new life and is then restored to their family, their friends, and their community. So this is powerful symbolism for a change in status each of us has undergone through belief in Yeshua and becoming a part of Elohim's family, that is Yisrael. This is described very, very well in Ephesians chapter 2. And we would go ahead and recommend reading that whole chapter in this context if you've never done so. We're just going to read the first 5 verses, and you'll see kind of the connections that we're talking about here, about how the Metzora was dead, effectively dead, and was made alive through the healing process. So we're going to look here now and read Ephesians 2, 1 through 5.
And you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Among them we too all formerly lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. But God, being rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our transgressions, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved.
So, I mean, that's a wonderful picture, and it's just summed up very well in verse 5. And, of course, it just keeps on going from there.
Yeah.
But, like the Metzora, like the leper, we were dead in our trespasses, cut off from the family of Elohim.
Yeah.
But Elohim made us alive together with Yeshua, being a part of the family now. And just the Metzora and his healing and the ritual that he goes through is a beautiful picture of these things.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's a matter of allowing him also to go ahead and do those things. It's not easy, going through the refiner's fire. It's not easy, iron and sharpening iron of somebody doing that in your life. But if you're able to go ahead and do that, then guess what? You get a precious stone. You get a pretty rock. You get a pretty, diamond or ruby, that comes out from it.
That's what we're looking to be. So, it definitely, this transition for the Metzora, it is a powerful picture of our relationship with Elohim through the Messiah Yeshua. But what else can we learn about our horizontal relationships, especially with a spouse or a potential spouse?
Yeah.
So one thing that we'll talk a little bit about here, we also already talked a little bit about, transitioning from single to married and that transition. Let's talk a little bit about our relationships. So have you ever experienced a vibrant relationship that was full of life, but then grew stagnant? It grew cold and died. Have you been able to successfully transition such a relationship from death back to life, effectively reviving or resurrecting a sick or infected relationship with an old friend or with a coworker, with your spouse, or even with Elohim? Here's another one to consider. What about your relationship with yourself? Sometimes we don't consider that we have a relationship with ourselves, but it is one of our most important relationships. Loving your own body, your own mind, your own spirit. Have you fallen into a rut or a dormant, a stagnant state with any part of yourself?
Yeah.
How can you successfully transition to a living, healthy relationship with yourself?
Yeah.
Or if you've, got the same thing in one of your other relationships, how can you transition from the sick and the infected back to healthy?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to, when we look about with your spouse, you loved them when you said I do. Mm-hmm. You loved them when you got married to them. Your first couple years of marriage, okay, you loved them. Well, what stopped? What was it that caused you to go ahead and stop and not continue on that dating your spouse in a way? So start doing that again. It's one step in front of the other. It's one love note in front of the other of just saying, hey, I love you. Going up to them and just randomly hugging them, going up to them and just randomly, touching their arms sometimes. That's all that it needs in a way. And then from there, just build upon that. It's the same thing in regards to kids. You know, you might have adult children now and you're like, okay, how do I build this relationship with them? Well, start finding out what they enjoy. You know, now with social media, it's like you can almost go on their social accounts and be like, okay, this is what they're into.
Mm-hmm.
This is the restaurant they were just at. Well, maybe I should go get a gift card from there, you know, and give that to them for their birthday next. Well, why not go ahead and do that? You know, you're able to go ahead and at least reach out and build that relationship back up again.
That's really, you know, what it's going to take. It's going to take effort.
Yeah.
It's going to take some things that you're going to have to do. If we want to look at how we can really work on this transitioning your relationship with yourself and with others from a sick, infected, stagnant state back to healthy, back to growing, let's look at part of these parts of the body that's discussed in Leviticus 14 through 18. We're going to go ahead and read that.
14 through 14, 18?
Yep.
Okay. Then the priest shall then take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall also take some of the log of oil and pour it on his left palm. The priest shall then dip his right hand finger into the oil that is in his left palm, and with his finger sprinkle some of the oil 7 times before the Lord. And of the remaining oil which is in his palm, the priest shall put some on the right earlobe of the one to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the blood of the guilt offering, while the rest of the oil that is in the priest's palm he shall put on the head of the one to be cleansed. So the priest shall make atonement on his behalf before the Lord.
So we're going to look a little bit at these 3 parts of the body. And we already talked about it a little bit, but your ear, you know, that represents hearing or paying attention, both to yourself and to your relationship partners.
Yeah.
Your thumb represents your actions or carrying out the things that will nourish and feed the parts of you, and also the parts of the relationships that are unhealthy, that are starved, that are stagnant. And your toe, well, we're not going to show you our toe, but that's going to mean committing to a walk or a lifestyle of consistently doing those other 2 things, of paying attention, listening to your own needs and desires and those of your relationship partners, and committing to using that information that you gathered to feed and nourish yourself in your relationships. So, I mean, you've got to, you know, pay attention, you've got to do, and you've got to commit to a consistent lifestyle of doing both.
Yes.
So, you know, that being said, I do want to just look a little bit at this relationship that we have with ourselves. And, you know, sometimes we pay a lot more attention to the relationships that we have with others, and we don't pay attention to the relationship that we have with ourselves. We've all been in an airline where they tell you about the safety precautions, where they say if the masks come down, then you've got to put the mask on yourself first, right? And then take care of your children or anybody else that's around you. That's because if you don't take care of yourself first, you're useless. You're not going to be able to help anybody else. So if you're always focusing on your other relationships, but you're starving yourself, that, you know, no good. No good. So what's some ways you could do that? Well, I mean, we could just look at some examples. Maybe your faith. Are you sick or stagnant with your personal scripture study, your personal time of praising Elohim or praying and just talking and listening to him? We can look at your hobbies. You know, are you starving yourself in these things? Are you giving yourself adequate time to be able to decompress and relieve stress and things of that nature? You have to get yourself healthy so that you can truly help and benefit your other relationships.
If not, then again, you're allowing yourself to just die. You know, you're not being happy in the way God created you to be, you know, because you're constantly giving, but you need to take care of yourself. You know, the big word out there lately is self-care, you know, so how are you taking care of yourself? You know, what are you doing mentally to go ahead and do it? What are you doing spiritually? You know, do you need to get up and go for a walk? You know, do you need to get an animal to be able to force yourself to go for a walk or for a run? You know, are you lacking in your hobbies? Like Mark said, you know, what are you doing to encourage yourself and to bring, in a way, happiness to yourself? You know, work on yourself. It's okay to go ahead and do that. Especially you parents of young ones, it's okay for you to go ahead and take care of yourself. It's okay to allow your kids to sit and watch a wholesome program while maybe you sit in the same room and read a book. It's okay to go ahead and do some of those things and take care of yourself.
Definitely. So,
Yeah.
let's pay attention to both ourselves and to our relationships. Just pay attention, put the effort in, the things that you're paying attention to and gathering that information on, put it into practice and just commit to that lifestyle of doing that. And that's how we're going to bring those unhealthy and stagnant, parts of ourself and our relationships back and transition them into health, into life, into growth.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and go into chapter 15 now.
Okay.
Again, we're assuming that you kind of are familiar with this chapter. It is basically the Torah of uncleanness from bodily discharges. That's basically what we're talking about. The bodily discharge causes a state of tameh, of uncleanness, chiefly to the one who discharges, but also to anyone who comes in contact with the unclean person or anything that the unclean person sits on or lies on. The remedy for the contact with the unclean person in most cases is washing your clothing, washing yourself, and then waiting for nightfall or the beginning of a new day. After these are done, you will be tahor, clean. The main point of all this is knowing whether you're in a state of tameh or if you're in a state of tahor. And the reason is it's down in verse 31 of chapter 15. It says, "Thus you shall separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness when they defile my dwelling place, which is in their midst." So, like, the main thrust of this is that, they could corrupt or defile the dwelling place through their uncleanness. So what can we take away from this and apply it in our relationships today? We're going to look at our ability to defile or corrupt others, as well as our vulnerability to be defiled or corrupted by others. And how is this done? I mean, yes, it's done physically through bodily discharges, but we also must be aware of verbal discharges that communicate thoughts, ideas, slander, allegation, gossip, etc. Our words and the words of those around us have a great impact on us, either for good or for evil, for construction or destruction. So we're going to talk about our words for a minute.
Exactly. It's a matter of, okay, are you uplifting? Do you encourage people around you? Do you encourage your family members around you? Or are you constantly negative? Do you constantly cuss and swear? Do you constantly put people down? Are you putting your kids down? How about your spouse? It's a matter of, what are you saying with your words? Our words have such power. Either they can uplift or they can tear down. And it's a matter of, what are you going to go ahead and do? It's your choice, to be able to be either uplifting to somebody or tearing them down.
Definitely. Ephesians 4:29, in this particular translation, it says, "Let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for the use of building up, so as to impart what is graceful to the hearers." Lots of great things we could mine out of that. But Paul's talking about the same thing that we're talking about here. So how does this work in our relationships today? With our spouse, our potential spouse, with our family, our friends, our community, our coworkers, just with humans in general. How does this work? So one thing we want to look at is, what kind of verbal discharges are you giving and receiving? How are these words affecting yourself and others? Are your words constructive or destructive? Are they corrupt or positive, graceful or disgraceful, honorable or shameful? What about the verbal discharges that you are receiving? We want you to pay close attention to the words of your potential spouse. What kind of words do they regularly use? Will they build you up? Will they tear you down?
And sometimes you almost have to, you don't want to keep a tally, but maybe you don't realize it. So maybe you go ahead and ask a close friend or ask your spouse, ask somebody and be like, "Hey, can you tell me how many times I use this word?" My mom used to do that with me, because she's like, "Sarah, you use too many filler words. You say way too many times when you're talking." And it's like, okay, I need to stop using the word And in one whole conversation, she's like, "Sarah, you said it like 10 times. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. Because sometimes you don't know that you are using all these kind of words, and sometimes they could be negative, sometimes they could be uplifting. So maybe you ask your spouse or a close friend and be like, hey, can you pay attention to what I'm saying? Am I using these kind of negative words in my everyday conversation? Maybe you ask your older kids and be like, hey, we're going to play a game this week, and whoever has the less points is going to win, and have them and write up a list of words that you're not wanting them to go ahead and use, and be like, okay, let's go ahead and, have fun with this kind of game, in a way. Include the kids in that, just like include your spouse and be like, hey, if we don't swear at each other or cuss at each other or use negative words towards each other, then you get to go do whatever on your day off. You don't get to do the honey-do list. You don't get to go do whatever it might be, But I mean, even us adults, we love games. I love treating myself to Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I don't do that often anymore. And so now it's like, it's a special treat to me, So it's a matter of, what are you going to go ahead and do? Again, you're taking care of yourself, but you're also realizing, okay, I have a dirty mouth. I have a dirty mouth and we need to fix this, and what can we go ahead and do to do that?
Yeah, and I mean, and really important, to look at this. Dirty mouth doesn't just mean words that the culture thinks are dirty words.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, those are not appropriate in a lot of situations. But it's what are the thoughts and the ideas we are communicating with words that are, they're considered fine by the culture, but there's a thought and there's an idea that we are transmitting through the words, and what are we transmitting to others? What are we infecting them with?
Yeah.
So what are some solutions that we can talk about? Remedies to this, what we're calling UVDs. The unclean verbal discharges that we encounter on a regular, if not daily basis, both from ourselves and from the people that we encounter. Well, there's a few steps, and the first one is going to be, as Sarah was just talking about, you've got to acknowledge or recognize that it's going on. We have to admit that we have a problem, either spreading the UVD, or if we want to go into a word that we all are maybe familiar with, the Lashon Hara, the evil tongue, or being exposed to such things. Now, likely it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an old movie quote. If you know it, then fine. But the first step in evading a trap is knowing of its existence. So if you're going to do anything about this problem, you've got to know it exists. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just going to continue in it.
Yeah.
So we've got to be able to recognize that, to acknowledge it. And if we're not doing it ourselves, like Sarah said, then we're going to need to get some other people around us to be able to help us point these things out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's okay. That's where a loving relationship and a loving spouse, loving kids, loving people around you, hopefully are okay to go ahead and do that, and that's why I said sometimes make it fun, especially when you are retransitioning, you're turning your ways. It's going to take a while, it's not going to be fun. Again, irony sharpens iron is not fun. Going through that refiner's fire is hard, and so rechanging the way you think, rechanging your thoughts, rechanging your actions, all of that is going to take time. But again, it's one step in front of the other, and what's great is we have a big God who's wanting to help us. We have somebody we can turn to and be like, God, I need your help today. Today might be tough and I need your help today. Help me today.
Definitely. Yeah. So we've got to acknowledge and recognize that we've got a problem. The next step is get cleaned up.
Yeah.
Okay. When we're exposed to the unclean bodily discharge, the main remedy is washing of the clothing and of the body. Well, exposure to unclean verbal discharges, or the Lashon Hara, requires a different manner of cleansing, for it penetrates to the heart, to the soul, and to the spirit. So we're going to get back into Ephesians. Let's go to Ephesians 5. And we're going to look at a very familiar passage of Scripture, and it does have to do with the husband-wife relationship. But we're going to read just a small little section of it, and it's Ephesians 5, verses 25 through 27.
Husbands, love your wife just as Messiah also loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and blameless. Where am I going to?
That was it. That's
Okay.
it. So, I mean, we're all hopefully, familiar with this idea of being washed by the word, okay? And many of us are probably familiar with, there's a couple words in Greek for word. And this one is that rhema word, which is a spoken word.
Yeah.
So basically what we're talking about is having Elohim's word spoken over you, or speak it over yourself to cleanse your heart, your soul, your spirit from the UVD, from the unclean verbal discharge. Yeah. So that's how we're going to get cleaned up from these things. So we've got to acknowledge the problem. We've got to get cleaned up by having his word spoken over us, or speaking it over ourselves if we need to. Yeah. And then we need to make a plan of action. Yeah. We need to commit to paying close attention to the speech that we encounter, both from our mouth and in our thoughts. Sometimes it's just going on between our ears, and from the mouth of others. Yeah. We're going to go to Psalm 141 and read a little bit there, because there is a couple verses that really hits on this. It's going to be Psalm 141, verses 3 through 5.
Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. Do not incline my heart to any evil thing, to practice deeds of wickedness with men who do iniquity, and do not let me eat of their delicacies. Yeah.
And that's probably, good enough. We can, the whole psalm is a great thing to go ahead and read. But right there, the psalmist is asking Elohim to set a guard over his mouth, watching over the door of my lips, so that these things are not pouring out of my mouth and my lips, and those UVDs are not going out and infecting everybody and tearing everybody down. Yeah. So, just this plan of action, you've got to learn how to catch yourself. Yes. Before you spread this unclean speech and start infecting everybody around you. Yeah. You've also got to learn to recognize the unclean speech of others and commit to removing yourself from a situation, not necessarily a relationship, but just a situation where unclean speech is occurring. We're not talking about definitely removing yourself from a relationship, but if people are having unclean speech, just, you recognize it, like, I can't be a part of this. Yeah. I'm going to go over here. Yeah. And you just have to make it your habit to practice cleansing yourself immediately when you come into contact with these UVDs. You've got to speak Elohim's word over yourself. You've got to hear his word over it when you encounter these UVDs. Don't allow those words to linger and penetrate into your heart, soul, your spirit, into your mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Little disclaimer, okay? If you are in a marriage relationship and it is an abusive relationship, you need to get help. Mm-hmm. You do. You need to get professional help. And you need to, if that spouse is not wanting to sit down and have a conversation about it, then you need to look into getting help, and figure out, okay, what do I need to go ahead and do to change either my behavior, or is it the other person's behavior that is the issue? What is it that we can go ahead and do? Both of us at times have had to sit down with each other and been like, okay, we need to talk about this. This is something that has come up. We need to figure this out. It's good to have those conversations, and that's why, you want to build that relationship up. That's why you want to have that spark still in your marriage, because life is going to be tough. Life is going to be hard, but it's a matter of sitting down and having those conversations with somebody, and being able to enjoy wanting to spend time with them, and again, you have to acknowledge that there's an issue. And if there is an issue, sometimes you need to get professional help, because you do have a dirty mouth of abuse. You need to deal with those anger issues, and you need to deal with that trauma of whatever's taken place to be able to move forward and to be able to get whole and to be able to allow the healing to be able to take place.
Yeah. It's okay to seek, the outside help. We all need it from time to time.
Yes. Yeah.
So just looking at that, especially talking about, the marital relationship, because, this is who, if the marriage is going the right way, you spend most of your time with. Yeah. Especially the best time is with them. Yeah. So who do you want to go ahead and form a marital relationship with? Now we're talking specifically to you singles with this. Who do you want to go ahead and form a relationship with? Yeah. One who doesn't spread UVDs. Yeah. They're not spreading these unclean verbal discharges. Yeah. One who doesn't linger in the presence of UVDs. Yeah. Because if they're lingering in the presence of these unclean verbal discharges, they're getting sick. Yeah. It's gonna spread. So someone who knows the effect of these things. Yeah. And you want someone who will speak Elohim's word over you. Yes. And to you. Yes. To cleanse you, like anything that's been going, anything you've come into contact throughout the day, I'm speaking his word, his promises, speaking these things over you to cleanse you. Yes. So those are some really key things to look for, in a marital partner. Yeah. If you're already in the marital relationship, well, then you got some things you need to talk about. Yeah. Even if things seem to be going good, you need to look at this and commit to limiting and eliminating these UVDs from your home. Yeah. We don't need any of this stuff going on in our home. Make the plan of action. Yeah. And commit to cleansing each other by speaking Elohim's word over each other. Yeah. That's the things that we need to do to recognize, to eliminate, to get clean, to keep our relationships healthy and not to get stagnant, not to get sick, not to get infected, but to stay in a healthy state. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Learned a lot here. Yeah, there's a lot going on with our relationships in these chapters. This Parsha Metzora, it's packed with lessons for all our relationships. We saw the emphasis on being alive and being healthy through looking at some of these underlying words, the emphasis that is having on life and being alive. Yeah. The ritual cleansing of the Metzora connected with the rituals of the red heifer and the ordination of the high priest, it symbolizes the transition from an old life into a new life, from sickness to health. We saw that we need to look inside of ourselves at our relationship with self, as well as our relationships with others, to be able to find, to recognize, to acknowledge the infection and stagnation so that we can recognize, pay attention, and nourish ourselves and our relationships back to health and growth. Yeah. The unclean bodily discharges and the methods of cleansing ourselves allowed us to look into a prevalent phenomenon in our lives today, which we term the UVD, or the unclean verbal discharges. In short, the evil tongue, the Lashon Hara. Yeah. The source of these UVDs is either from your own mouth or from the mouth of others going into your ear. So we saw the need as the family of Elohim to recognize or acknowledge these UVDs, to wash ourselves, get cleaned up, and develop a plan of action to guard our heart and mind as well as the hearts and the minds of those around us. Yeah. So that we all stay healthy, so that we all stay clean, so that we all are growing. We need to find a spouse with clean, wholesome words that will build up and encourage and not tear down and destroy our hearts and our minds. Yeah. So we hope you've enjoyed this journey of studying the Torah of portion Metzora through the lens or the focus of relationships with us. And it's been great.
Yeah, it has. So make sure you like and follow. And of course, you can find us on all of the social sites. You can also email us as well at contactus@hebrewshebrew.com. And then if you are single and looking for your spouse, definitely make sure you join our website at hebrewshebrew.com. See you next time. Have a great day. Bye.
Shalom.